Hi there! I am Shaina May Foraparas, a nursing student from Sultan Kudarat State University. And I have a quick question. Have you ever heard someone say, "Be careful, you might get tetanus from the crusty nails"? Yeah? You're not alone. So, that's a pretty common warning. But have you ever stopped and wondered, what is tetanus? Is it just about the rusty nails? Or is there more to the story? Well, in this video, we're going to uncover the truth behind tetanus, also known as lockjaw. So, we'll talk about how it spread, what it does to the body, and most importantly, how to prevent it. Don't worry, we'll keep things simple, clear, and maybe a little fun. So, whether you heard about tetanus or just finally want to understand what all the fuss is about, you're in the right place. So, let's get started. So, what is tetanus? Tetanus is a very serious and sometimes deadly disease that affects the nervous system. It's caused by a dangerous toxin, a neurotoxin called tetanus plasmid. A neurotoxin is a poison that specifically attacks your nerves, the system in your body that controls muscles, movements, and reflexes. This toxin is made by a type of bacteria called Clostridium tetani. Now, that's what's special about this bacteria. It is anaerobic, which means it lives and multiplies best in place with very or no oxygen. That's why it's especially dangerous when it enters deep wounds, puncture injuries, or cuts contaminated with dirt, manure, or rusty metals. Because those places are low in oxygen and giving the bacteria the perfect environment to grow. Once inside the body, Clostridium tetani doesn't spread throughout the whole body. Instead, it stays in the wound and releases the tetanus plasmid, the toxin that travels through the nerves to the brain and spinal cord. The result, muscles starts to contract uncontrollably. People with tetanus experience severe muscle stiffness and spasm, especially in the jaw and neck area. That's why it's often called the lockjaw. In serious cases, it can make hard to breathe, swallow, or even survive. So, how dangerous tetanus really is? So, tetanus is not just painful; it can be deadly. That's why the fatality rate or the chances of dying from it ranges from 10 to 70%, which is if it is not treated properly. So, people who haven't been vaccinated or babies are especially at risk. In places with limited medical care or disaster zones, rural areas, or places where vaccines aren't easily available, tetanus still causes many deaths today. The good news: tetanus is completely preventable with vaccine. That's why routine immunization and booster shots are important, especially for the people who are working outdoors, handling soil, or living in areas with limited health cares. So, next slide is, oh, let's warm up our brain before diving in today's lesson. So, in the next slides, there are five jumbled words, each related to how tetanus is caused or spread. So, you can pause the video after each word and try to unscramble it. And guess what it means. Then you can press the play button and check your answers and explanation. So, good luck! So, first word. A four-letter word with a hint. The hint is, this is where the tetanus bacteria live and it's beneath your feet. What is in beneath your feet? So, again, the hint is, this is where the tetanus live and it's beneath your feet. Pause. So, the answer is soil, since it is beneath your feet. So, Clostridium tetani, the bacteria that causes tetanus, lives in soil, especially soil contaminated with animal manure or decaying matter. So, when this bacterium enters the body through a wound, it can release the dangerous toxin which is called the tetanus plasmid. So, it's very dangerous for farmers to pabayaan ang kanilang wounds, and it because it can be contaminated with the bacteria and can cause tetanus. So, next is a word consisting of 5 letters. So, the hint: waste from animals that can contaminate wounds. Again, a 5-letter word with a hint: waste from animals that can contaminate wounds. What do you call the waste of animals? So, pause. The answer is feces. So, animal feces often contain Clostridium tetani spores. Farm workers, just like I said, or those in close contact with livestock are higher risk if wounds are exposed to contaminated materials. Just like what I said earlier, they are at higher risk, the agriculturists and or farmers. So, next word is a 6-letter word with a hint: breaks in the skin that lead the bacteria in. Hint again: breaks in the skin that let the bacteria in. The answer is wounds. So, the entry point of the bacteria is usually through an open wound. Diba? Wounds. So, especially punctured wounds, burns, or deep cuts. Even small cuts allow tetanus spores to enter the body if the environment is contaminated. So, don't be magpakampante if you have scratches and you are handling with contaminated materials such as decaying matter or leaves, dried leaves. A child can be playing into a dried leaves tapos mayroon palang Clostridium tetani doon. So, it can enter the wound of the child and can cause tetanus. Kahit scratch lang, it is very important to clean the wound. So, later we would discuss how to prevent it. So, next word is a 4-letter word. So, the hint: found on old nails or metals, often or wrongly blamed for tetanus. Again, a 4-letter word. Hint: found on old nails or metal, often wrongly blamed for tetanus. So, the answer: stop. It is rust. So, tetanus is not caused by rust. So, we should debuff that myth. So, it is not caused by rust, but the rusty objects like nails are often dirty and contaminated with soil, diba? It is contaminated with soil. So, which is why they are commonly associated with tetanus infection. So, again, rust is not the cause of tetanus, but it is commonly dirty and contaminated. That is why nasasabing siya ang dahilan, but it's not. Diba? Okay, so, next. SORPES. S. What is this 6-letter word again? This is the last one. So, 6-letter word, which is the SORPES. With a hint, these tiny, tough forms of bacteria can survive in dirt for years. Tiny, tough forms of bacteria which can survive in dirt for years. Stop. The answer is spores. So, tetany forms spores which are tough, dormant forms of the bacteria. These spores survive in harsh environment and like soil and dust and can activate when they enter a suitable place like inside the wound. So, remember. So, great job if you got some or all of it right. So, remember, like unlike any infectious diseases, tetanus is not spread from person to person. You got it when bacterial spores enter the body through a break in the skin, which is wound. So, where are the spores found? First is soil, dust, manure, and rusty metals, not the rust, but the dirt, okay? We have already debuffed that myth. So, another thing is the animal feces and contaminated surface. Next is common in tropical and agricultural country. Example, the Philippines, tropical and agricultural country. So, how it enters the body? It is through wounds such as punctured wounds caused by nails, needles, splinters, and thorns. Another is crushed injuries and burns, especially if they left untreated. Next is surgical wounds, especially under poor hygienic condition. Animal bites or insect stings, and chronic ulcers or abscesses. And this is important thing, especially for the newborn baby. So, the umbilical cord stump in newborn babies in non-sterile birth settings. So, once inside, the spores germinate under low oxygen conditions and start producing tetanus plasmid, which travels through the bloodstreams or nerves to the brain and spinal cord. So, remember, these are the causes and how tetanus is transmitted. Okay. The average incubation period is 8 to 10 days, but it can vary depending on the first, the distance of the wound from the central nervous system. So, in comparison sa i-compare natin yung nasa face na wound and nasa feet na wound, and both of them are infected. 'Di ba? Mas malapit yung nasa face na wound from the central nervous system than in the distal part ng body na infected. So, remember, the shorter the incubation, the more severe the disease is likely to be. Since, compared natin ulit yung nasa face. So, kasi di ba nasa face na siya, tetanus progress rapidly. So, hindi natin ma-apply yung interventions, proper interventions than sa pag-progress ng signs and symptoms. So, hindi pa natin natapos yung ating interventions, pwedeng namatay na yung patient. Be alert for the early symptoms such as the jaw stiffness or the lockjaw, the neck stiffness, the difficulty swallowing, stomach and facial muscle spasm, a fixed and unnatural facial expression, or called rhesus sardinicus. And be aware, especially for this, the severe symptoms. So, the generalized seizures like spasm, back arcing, or opisthotonus, clenched fist, breathing problems, fever, and rapid heartbeat or extreme blood pressure swings. So, the types of tetanus. So, first type of tetanus. So, we would now proceed to the types of tetanus. So, first is generalized tetanus. So, generalized tetanus is the most common and well-known form of the disease, accounting for 80% of tetanus. It usually starts with the classic symptoms called the Christmas or the lockjaw. So, where the jaw muscles become so tight that the patient can't open their mouth. So, from there, the rigidity spreads. From the lockjaw, the rigidity spreads. The neck becomes stiff, and the person may have difficulty swallowing due to pharyngeal muscle involvement. Soon after, we see facial muscle spasm, producing a characteristic look called like the rhesus sardinicus. A painful grimacing expression. As the toxin continues to affect the motor neurons, the entire body begins to experience severe painful muscle spasm. These are often characterized by simple stimuli like touch, a loud noise, and flash of light. In severe cases, the back arcs into dramatic posture called the opisthotonus, caused by a powerful contraction of the spinal muscles. So finally, the toxin interferes with the autonomic nervous system, leading to dangerous complications like profuse sweating, high blood pressure, and racing heartbeat. So, generalized tetanus requires urgent medical care, often including ICU admission, antitoxin, sedation, and mechanical ventilation. So, early recognition saves life. Okay? Next type of tetanus. So, the neonatal tetanus. So, neonatal tetanus is a severe form of generalized tetanus that only affects the babies. So, typically within the 3 to 14 days after birth. So, it is most common or often caused by the infection of the umbilical stump. So, infection of the umbilical stump of the baby, especially when unclean cutting tools, contaminated substance, or improper cord care. So, are used during or after the delivery. The bacterium Clostridium tetani enters through the freshly cut umbilical area, releasing its neurotoxin into the baby's bloodstream. The earliest signs are the poor sucking reflexes, the persistent crying, and stiffness. So, as the disease progresses, the newborn experience generalized muscle spasm, making feeding and even breathing extremely difficult. So, kawawa. So, neonatal is tragically and often fatal without urgent medical care. And deaths frequently occur and in low resource settings. However, this disease is almost entirely preventable. In countries like good maternal health care, routine vaccination of pregnant women with Tdap or TT or tetanus toxoid and clean delivery practices, neonatal tetanus has become rare. This form of tetanus serves as critical reminder of the importance of maternal immunization and safe birthing environments to protect the most vulnerable, the newborn. So, this especially for us nurses to ensure hygiene and cleanliness of our environment to provide health and hygiene to our patient and to prevent this kind of situation. Also, for the mother, ensure to be vaccinated to prevent this kind of situation because it's very kawawa ang mga baby if this happened. So next type of tetanus is the localized tetanus, which is a rare type and typically milder form. Since it occurs when muscle spasms are only limited to the area around the wound, often the site of injury or contamination. The patient experiences persistent painful contraction in that specific region. Do not show full body symptoms. Though usually not life-threatening, it must be or it must not be ignored because in some cases it can progress into generalized tetanus, which is more severe. So, localized tetanus only affect the wound or around the area around the wound which is infected, but do not ignore it and seek medical assistance once you experience the signs and symptoms because it can turn into generalized tetanus, which is more severe and really can cause death. So next is cephalic tetanus. On the other hand, is the most or the rarest form of tetanus, which making up only for less than 3% of the cases of tetanus. So it typically follows head or facial injuries or sometimes ear infection, particularly the ototis media. So, what makes it distinct is that it affects the cranial nerves, especially the facial cranial nerves. So, especially the facial, leading to facial paralysis, drooping eyelids or ptosis, and lockjaw or the trismus. So, though the initial signs might seem minor, this form of tetanus can quickly become generalized tetanus, and it carries a high fatality rate if not treated immediately. So, both the localized and cephalic, despite being milder than the other two, it needs or it still requires urgent medical evaluation. So, treatment should be given immediately so that we can prevent the progression and save life. Okay, so kailangan talaga alam natin yung signs and symptoms for us to identify kung anong type of tetanus ito. So, Next, we have already discussed the types of tetanus, the diagnosis. So, diagnosing tetanus is a bit different from the most infections because walang specific na lab test or imaging scan that can confirm it. So, doctors depend primarily on the clinical picture, and that is your signs and symptoms and also your history. So, they'll ask things like, did you have a recent injury involving something dirty or rusty? Or have you been vaccinated recently? Next is, are you experiencing muscle stiffness or spasm, especially in your locked jaw? So, now, you might ask, why aren't lab tests helpful? Right? Diba? Kasi commonly, if ang infection, if there are any infections, palaging lab test ang hinahanap or ginagawa to identify if we have that certain kind of disease or illness. So, hindi ito a-apply sa tetanus. Since, even if we take a wound sample and try nating i-grow ang Clostridium tetani inside the lab, it can only shows up to about 30% of the cases, which is not reliable. Imagine, only 30%, diba? Hindi nga, hindi nga 50, 30 lang. So, tapos i-apply in the lab, hindi. So, we should ensure. So, it is not useful if we use lab test. So, also, tetanus is a clinical. So, another thing is, tetanus is clinical emergency. So, waiting for the lab results could only delay life-saving treatment. Because, diba, sabi natin, tetanus progress rapidly. And if not prevented or not having interventions from that, mamamatay yung patient natin. Mamamatay yung patient if not treated properly. So, doctors also have to rule out other conditions that causes similar symptoms. Also, meron ring ibang illness or infections na may similar na symptoms such as the strychnine, poisoning, and drug-induced seizures or spasm. So, tetanus is a clinical diagnosis that doctors ask based on what they observe and not for the test result. So, walang lab test is meron bang tetanus yung patient. The doctors only do diagnosis based on the signs and symptoms. So, next. So, since, diba, since walang lab test since walang lab test ang tetanus and diagnosis is only based on the symptoms, we should stop tetanus right at the source. So, step 1, we should clean it well. We do thorough cleaning and okay. So, walang lab test ang tetanus and diagnosis is only based on the signs and symptoms of the patient. So, the treatment is first, clean it well. So, we should stop tetanus right at the source, which is the break into the skin, which is the wound. So, we do thorough cleaning and debridement. That means we remove any dirt, dead tissue, or foreign objects. Why? Because Clostridium tetani loves dead tissue. It creates the perfect oxygen-free environment for it to grow and release its dangerous toxin. Next is the tetanus immune globulin or TIG. So think of this as an emergency antidote. The TIG gives the body instant protection by neutralizing the toxin, especially the person who isn't fully vaccinated or the wound is at higher risk or malapit siya sa central nervous system. So remember, clean it, debride it, and if needed, TIG it. Bang, bang. Next treatment is the symptom control. Okay, we have already cleaned and started protection. So what about those painful spasms? That's how symptom control enters the picture. So first up, muscle relaxant like diazepam or baclofen. These help calm the muscles and reduce those involuntary spasm. And for severe spasm, especially the ones triggered by the light or sound, we may need sedation to keep the body relaxed and avoid injury. And here's an interesting one. Magnesium sulfate, which it doesn't just relax the muscles, but it actually lowers the reflex excitability, making the spasm less likely. So, we're not just fighting the bacteria, we're also calming the body down to help it recover. That's why we need to control the symptoms because malay mo, ma-break ang kanyang bones habang the symptoms occur or meron siyang muscle spasm, diba? Or strains or anything. That's why we need to control the signs and symptoms, especially those back arcing. It can cause injury to the patient. So, next, we have already calmed the symptoms and cleaned the wound. Next, we should actually eliminate the actual cause, which is the Clostridium tetani, which is a bacteria. So, we need antibiotics. The main players, metronidazole and penicillin. Metronidazole is often preferred because it's effective and doesn't worsen the muscle spasm. A bonus. Next, these antibiotics can help clean up the infection so the body or other term blah, 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 blah. Ay, kapal ako. So these antibiotics help clean up the infection so the body and other treatments can focus on recovery. Remember, antibiotics treat the toxin. They stop new toxin from forming it. It's all a complete battle plan. So, ang antibiotics, ginastop niya ang toxin or the tetanus plasmin to multiply more and can cause more serious incident to the patient. Next is the supportive care. So even if the wound, antibiotics, and symptom controls, tetanus can still cause serious complication. That's why supportive care is critical. Often required ICU level monitoring to closely watch the patient's vital signs. If breathing muscles get too tight, the patient may need ventilator support to help them breathe safely. So swallowing becomes difficult with severe spasm. So a feeding tube may be used to ensure proper nutrition. And of course, pain management is essential to keep the patient comfortably during the recovery. Supportive care is the best backbone of the treatment. It helps the patient to survive and heal while other treatments do their work. You might think once infected, you're protected. But it's not the case with the tetanus. So, vaccination is essential, even if during the infection. So, it helps your body build long-term immunity against future tetanus exposure. While treatment fights the current infection, vaccine trains your immune system for the next battle. Vaccination is clinical or critical step, not just to prevent but also part of the recovery. Now we have already discussed the types of tetanus. Next is vaccination. So, tetanus vaccines, its types, uses, and the schedule. Vaccination is the most effective strategy for preventing tetanus, and several vaccines are available, and each tailored for specific age and medical needs. So these vaccines often come in combination with protection against diphtheria and pertussis or the whooping cough. So making them efficient tools for comprehensive immunization and immunization. So the next slides break down the major tetanus containing vaccine. First is the DTaP. First is the DTaP. So, diphtheria, tetanus, and a cellular pertussis. This vaccine is specifically made for infants and children under 7 years old. So why? Because kids are especially vulnerable and they need full strength against all three diseases, which is the diphtheria, tetanus, and a cellular pertussis. So DTaP is administered in 5 doses at 2 months old, 4 months old, 6 months old, and between 15 to 18 months old. And finally, between 4 to 6 years old. So these doses build up strong immunity earlier in life. However, this vaccine is not suitable for anyone above 7 years old, as their immune system responded differently. So if a child can tolerate the pertussis component, maybe due to allergies, they receive DT instead, which excludes the pertussis part. So, next is Tdap, a booster shot for older children, teens, and adults. The A and lower grade. So, next is Tdap, a booster shot for older children, teens, and adults. So the letter A and the lower D stands for reduced doses of diphtheria and pertussis compared to the DTaP. It's a maintenance shot, not a starter. Perfect for keeping immunity strong. So here's the schedule. 1 dose for 11 years to 12 years old, 1 dose for adults who never had it before, and 1 dose during every pregnancy. Ideally between 27 and 36 weeks to pass antibodies to the newborn. So it's especially used in wound care if someone's last tetanus was over 5 years ago or unknown. So even if DTaP as a child, even if you got DTaP as a child, Tdap is still necessary, essential later in life. And 1 dose during every pregnancy, ideally between 27 and 36 weeks to pass antibodies to the newborn. It's also used in care if someone's last tetanus shot was over 5 years ago or unknown. And even if you got DTaP as a child, Tdap is still necessary later in life. Next, next kind of tetanus vaccine is TD. TD stands for tetanus and reduced diphtheria. This vaccine doesn't contain pertussis and it's only mainly used for adolescents and adults as a routine booster every 10 years. If someone has already DTaP once, future boosters can be TD instead. It's also administered after certain injuries if it's not been over 5 years since the last tetanus shot. It's a reliable long-term defense, especially for adults who don't need pertussis protection. So that is TD, the reduced TD, which stands for tetanus and reduced diphtheria. DT, which stands or similar to DTaP without the pertussis component. It is given to children under 7 years old who cannot safely receive the pertussis vaccine. So often due to medical conditions or allergic reactions. So the TD or the DT is similar or has a similar schedule sa DTaP, which is composed of 5 doses. Though it is less common, it is still crucial option for children with contraindications such as yung allergic reactions nga. And lastly, last example is the TT or tetanus toxoid. So, tetanus toxoid is a tetanus-only vaccine, primarily used in low source settings. Primarily used in low resource settings or adults who only need tetanus protection. Like during emergency wound management, it can protection. So, primarily used in low resource settings or adults who only need tetanus protections like during emergency wound management. It can be a part of 3-dose series in areas where it can be part of the 3-doses series in where combination vaccines aren't widely available. While it's less used in countries with strong vaccine infrastructure, tetanus toxoid is still vital in global tetanus prevention efforts. So, tetanus is deadly, but entirely preventable. These vaccines aren't just shots, they are lifelines. From a baby's first DTaP dose to a mother's protective TDAP during pregnancy, and the TD boosters that carry us through adulthood. Each vaccines build up a shield of protection that spans through a lifetime. But this shield is only works if we keep it strong. That means completing the vaccine schedule, staying up to date with boosters, and acting faster after injuries. And by understanding and using the right vaccine at the right time, we don't just protect ourselves. We protect our families, our communities, and future generations. Let's keep fighting tetanus, not just with knowledge, but with action. When it comes to tetanus, prevention is truly the best and only cure. Diba? Prevention and control measures. So, the first and most powerful shield against tetanus is vaccination. It doesn't just protect one person, it builds a community immunity. Everyone from infants to older adults needs to follow the recommended schedule. This begins, just I said earlier, this begins with the DTaP vaccine in newborn and followed by Tdap and DT boosters throughout life. And even during that tetanus infection, vaccination is still given to provide long-term protection because the disease itself doesn't give you immunity. So, vaccine saves life. And tetanus is 100% preventable through vaccination. So, next is wound care. So, tetanus bacteria, as I said earlier, loves. So, second is wound care. Tetanus bacteria, just like I said earlier, it loves dirty and oxygen poor wounds. That's why cleaning the wounds immediately and thoroughly is absolutely essential. Even for small scrapes or punctures, use soap and water to flush out the debris and never ignore a wound that comes from something dirty, rusty, or animal-contaminated wound. So, debridement or removing the dead tissue helps stop the bacterial growth because dead tissue is the favorite food of because dead tissue is the very favorite place of the Clostridium tetani to grow. So, removing it stop the bacterial growth. If a wound looks suspicious or you are unsure of the vaccination status, seek medical help. A simple wound can turn deadly if left untreated. Next, prevention. Third prevention and control measure is we have already discussed this earlier, the tetanus immune globulin or the TIG. It is a special treatment for people who are unvaccinated or only partially vaccinated and have high risk wounds. So TIG works by giving you ready-made antibodies to fight that toxin immediately. So buying time until your body can develop its own immunity through the vaccines. So it's especially important for deep punctures, contaminated wounds, or injuries in people with unknown or outdated history. So TIG is very important. And lastly definitely is the education. So we must spread awareness in every community about how the tetanus is prevented and treated. Since health workers, teachers, and leaders must emphasize the importance of complete vaccination. So clean and safe childbirth practices, especially in rural or low-resource areas to prevent neonatal tetanus. Proper wound care in everyday life, and most importantly is when to seek medical help early. Don't ignore simple signs and symptoms as this can turn into deadly tetanus. So, when communities are informed, they are empowered, and empowered communities prevent tetanus. So, we have already end our discussion. Next is we will be having a group quiz. So, group quiz instruction. Form a group of 5 members and get ready to compete in identification quiz about tetanus. So each group will be given a question and 30 seconds to discuss and write down the correct answer. So all questions are identification type, so be specific and accurate. The group with the highest number or correct answers at the end wins. So form a group and answer the identification quiz by group for 30 seconds each question. So at the end of the quiz, please send your group members and your score through our Google Drive, or you can message me. So, ready? Good luck, everyone. So first is ho ho ho. First is the term for the condition where muscles throughout the body cease and do not relax. So this is a symptoms or a sign. So the term for the condition where the muscles throughout the body cease and do not relax. So the answer is generalized tetanus. So, just like we have discussed, this is the most common tetanus and the most severe type of tetanus, accounting for 80% of the cases. It causes widespread painful muscle stiffness and usually starting in the jaw or lockjaw and progressing to the neck, back, and limbs. So the spasms are continuous and can be life-threatening, affecting breathing and other vital functions. Next question. Name the characteristic a facial expression caused. So next is name the characteristic of a facial expression caused by muscle spasm where the corners of the mouth are pulled back into a smile-like appearance. So, name the characteristic facial expression caused by muscle spasm where the corners of the mouth are pulled back into a smiled-like appearance. So, the answer, stop. So, the answer is the rhesus sardinicus. Diba? Or rhesus sardinicus is a classic signs of or a classic symptoms of tetanus. So where the facial muscle spasm distort into expression like a rigid, grim, smile-like appearance. It is caused by involuntary contraindication or contractions of facial muscles, particularly around the mouth and eyes, due to neurotoxins effects on the central nervous system. So, next. So, what is the term for the severe muscle spasm that causes the back to arc upward during tetanus? Is opisthotonus. It is a severe muscle spasm involving the back and neck extensor muscle, causing the person's back to arc into a rigid bow like posture. It's a hallmark of advanced tetanus and indicates central nervous system involvement due to tetanus spasmin toxin. Next question. Next question is a condition where there is a difficulty swallowing because of muscle spasm. A difficulty or a condition where there is a difficulty swallowing because of muscle spasm. This is the dysphagia. So, dysphagia refers to swallowing, and in tetanus, it's due to involuntary spasm of the throat and muscles. These spasms interfere with ability to swallow food, drink, and even saliva, increasing the risk of aspiration and choking. Next. Next is the next question. This type of tetanus occurs only muscles close to the injury site are affected. This type of tetanus occurs when only muscles close to the injury sites are affected. Answer: the localized tetanus. So localized tetanus, right, is a rare, milder form of tetanus where the muscle spasms are limited to the area near the wound or injury site. Although not as dangerous as generalized tetanus, it can progress into generalized form if not treated promptly. So, sir, next question. A neurotoxin responsible for causing symptoms of tetanus is called the neurotoxin responsible for causing the symptoms of tetanus is called tetanus plasmin. So, tetanus plasmin is the powerful neurotoxin produced by Clostridium tetani bacterium. It travels through the nervous system and blocks inhibitory signals, leading to continuous, uncontrolled muscles contraindications or contractions and spasm. It's the main cause of all tetanus symptoms. The tetanus plasmin. Tetanus plasmin is the toxin produced by what bacteria? Clostridium tetani. So, next question. In newborns, tetanus often result from the infection of blank after unclean delivery practices. What part of the baby that results, which is infected after unclean delivery? Part of the body of the baby after unclean delivery. The umbilical stump. So, neonatal tetanus occurs when tetany enters through the body of the baby's umbilical stump, especially when it's cut or dressed with unsterile tools or materials. This is common in areas with poor maternal vaccination and home births without medical assistance. So, unclean environment. Next question. The incubation period for tetanus symptoms usually ranges between blank days. The incubation period of tetanus symptoms usually ranges between blank days. 3 to 21 days. 3 to 21 days. So the incubation period refers to the time between the exposure to the bacteria and appearance of the symptoms. So, nag-range siya sa 3 to 21 days. Pero, ang average days is 8 to 10. Average is 8 to 10, pero meron talagang 8 to 21. Yan ang range ng bacteria. So, the shorter the incubation often signals to more severe the disease. Next question. A key challenging in diagnosing tetanus is that there is no specific blank to confirm it. Na-discuss na. A key challenge in diagnosing tetanus is that there is no specific blank to confirm it. The answer is blood test. So, tetanus diagnosing is clinical and based on what gana signs and symptoms of the patient. And because the laboratory results are not available because it only has 30% of the cases of tetanus, diba? So, So, tetanus diagnosis is clinical and meaning it's based on the signs and symptoms of the patient and its history. And because laboratory are not available, only 30% of cultures grow Clostridium tetani. And no blood test can detect tetanus plasmid. Therefore, early clinical recognition is critical. Lastly, the muscle spasm that affects muscle involved in swallowing and breathing. The muscle spasm that affects muscle involved in swallowing and breathing is called black. So, the answer is generalized muscle spasm. So, in generalized tetanus, spasm are not limited to one area. They affect critical muscles including those needed for breathing and swallowing, such as the diaphragm, intercostal, throat, and jaw muscle. So this is why generalized tetanus is dangerous and often requires ICU level care. We are done. Congrats. So, I know you did break a leg by answering that. So, you did a good job. And I know you answered most of it correctly, or maybe all of it, right? So, now, you would proceed to the group activity. So, with your name or with your same group of members, your next task is to create an eye-catching and informative posters about tetanus vaccine. So, think of yourself as health influencers. Your goal is to educate and engage your audience. So, your poster must answer what are the types of tetanus vaccine, who should get them, when should they be given, and why they are important. So be creative, use colors, drawings, and symbols and make your message stand out. The most engaging and informative and well-designed poster will win a prize. Ready? Let the health education magic begins. So, may the odds be in your favor. Next is Another, make a reflection. Make a reflection about how important is tetanus in. Next is make a reflection about how the type of vaccines differentiate with each other. How DTaP differentiate with DDaP or or TD or TT or DT, right? So make a reflection about that. Also, number 2 is how it is important in our life, especially here in the Philippines. How important vaccines in our life, especially here in the Philippines. So, send your answer via our Google Drive. So, later. Send it later. So, thank you. That's all. I hope you learned something in our today's discussion. And please, today's discussion. So, thank you. God bless and have a great day, everyone. Bye.